Greetings to everyone. My name is John Bishop. I pastor a church up in the Northwest called Living Hope. And I wanted to thank Leadership Network to be a part of this project. And I'm looking forward to learning from the different um, pastors and leaders around the country, and humbled to be a part of this. I wanted to take a moment. I was thinking about, Todd said talk about what you're passionate about, or talk about something you would talk to a pastor about. It could be motivational or it could be inspirational. And really, if I had one thing to say, if it was the last words that I would talk to someone about, if it was the one conversation that we would have, there's tons to talk about. What's a pastor to say in 9 minutes? But when I really boil it down to what's the one thing that I would want to talk about, is I think is what would is the thing that Jesus would talk about. Jesus was about one mission. I think in church, I notice the bigger that we get, the tendency of the dumber that we've got, because we think we have to fulfill everything and do everything and go everywhere and be everything to everyone. And I'm realizing over the course of our journey that to the extent that we kept on mission is to the extent that God has blessed our lives. When we're in that blessable zone as a church, and I call it the blessability zone, you can feel an empowerment from the Holy Spirit. You can feel a sense of a vision and joy in the staff. And for me, I think often what would I want to say my last words instead of me? Why don't we go and look at what Jesus said in his last words in the book of Acts, chapter 1, verse 8. Jesus says, when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, you will receive power and will tell everyone about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, throughout Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. I like the way the NIV translates that passage better, because it says, you'll be my witnesses. Jesus says to these young leaders of the first church, he says to the people listening, and just shortly after that, he is gone, and that was it. And so Jesus' last words ought to be our first words. His last thoughts ought to be the thing that we're most passionate about. I wonder in our churches how much we're measuring what we do by what Jesus said, and not what's the popular technology, but what's the simplest message of the gospel. And when I think of that passage, and I'm the witness for Jesus, yeah, my church is, but am I? And as pastors, I wonder, and I think, and I pray about this so much, that our churches are going to be marked with a level of real devotion. They'll be marked with a sense of a supernatural empowerment from the Holy Spirit. Or we'll play games. We'll just play church. We'll be a club. We'll be about keeping people. And for us, from day one, we've been just simply about reaching lost people. In the Pacific Northwest, more lost people than most places in the country. And for us, we've made it very, very clear that our mission is not to be a club for people. If you want to be a part of this church, you're going to come. We're going to together be witnesses. That word translated in the Greek is for witnesses is martyros, and martyros is where we get, of course, our English word for martyr. And when I think about what matters the most, I can't not see what Jesus said. My Jerusalem is my world. It's my personal world. It's not just my world for my church. It's my world, John's world personally. Also, when you think of Judea, just that region beyond, for us it's the Pacific Northwest. And Samaria, of course, was the region where no one wanted to go. The Samaritans were highly despised, of course, by the Jews. And so people would literally walk around. They wouldn't even want the dust of their sandals to be the dust from the region of Samaria to be on their sandals. When I think about that, I think about then to the ends of the earth, most of America, you could say, from when that was said a couple thousand years ago till today, that we're a fulfillment in America of that passage. And I believe in the local church, and you do too, or you wouldn't be watching this. I believe in the mission of the local church, and I believe you do too. Here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that you'll let fear, I'm afraid that you'll let things that don't matter step in. I'm afraid that we can get so busy doing really good things that we'll miss the great thing, the Great Commission. I'm afraid that as churches we'll spend too much time looking at each other and miss looking at God. I'm afraid that sometimes I'll be about comparing to the Willow Creeks or the Saddlebacks, and I'll miss the divine, unique calling that God has on my life. And so I think it's our turn. It's as pastors, churches, thousands of churches watching this, it's our turn to take back ground that the enemy's stolen. And it's not going to begin with bigger buildings. It's not going to begin with balanced budgets. It's not going to begin with fancy programs and great things. It's going to begin with going back to the word, be witnesses. When I'm a witness and I model that as a church, then I can count on my church following that leadership. But, I feel like God has given me a gift of evangelism, but I would say all churches, all pastors are not evangelistic per se. Not evangelists, but I think we all have to have an evangelistic thread through our churches, or we just have to be honest, are we playing a game? And won't we always sacrifice for what we love? I just got back from Cabo San Lucas. We're starting a campus down there, and just in a little while, and I was thinking about this because we went out on a fishing trip with, there's 5 of us guys, and all of us went out and we caught a bunch of yellowfin tuna. It was fun, I guess. But I realized in that trip, I'm not a fisher guy. I don't really like it. I don't really want to fish. And I realized because we were in rough water, I started getting seasick. It was like this totally, like I had this like attitude, and it was like so stupid. And when we got back, I realized my attitude was what I chose to have. And I realized that fishing for me is not something I don't really care about it enough to sacrifice. In fact, I told our church last weekend, I think really I do most of my best fishing at Safeway or Albertsons. When I think about that, is I'm not really willing to sacrifice and to be sick and to get up early and to do all the things that you have to do if you're into fishing. Some guys love it. Half the guys loved it. A couple of us just didn't. But it made me wonder. I wonder how many church pastors love fishing for people. Jesus said we're fishers of men. He didn't say your church will be. He said you are. And I wonder if we're not willing to sacrifice for what matters to God, what game are we playing? What are we thinking? How do I dare approach the pulpit? How do I dare take a check from a church that I'm not willing to do what Jesus did? To sacrifice, to risk, to be willing to be uncomfortable for the sake of reaching the world. Jesus says, go everywhere and reach everyone. And if I'm not willing to do that, I have to seriously ask, is the call of God on my life one about comfort and convenience? Or is the call of God on my life one about conviction and character? Is it one where I'm willing to go where the fish were at? For us, we had to go 30 miles out. It was like, I'm a 5 mile from shore guy. I'm not a 30 mile from shore in the ocean kind of guy in the Pacific Ocean. And as I began to think about that, I realized if you love something, you'll sacrifice for it. If you have joy through something, you'll give something for it. My kids, I love them. I will drop everything to take their phone call, always. I wonder, though, are we about that when it comes to reaching lost people? I mean, it's really cool to say that we are, and it sounds really good on a mission statement, and no one would ever say they're not about that. But go back and ask, how many people have been saved in the church this last year? How many baptisms have there been? How many people invite their lost friends to your churches? How much am I personally sharing my faith? Not the church and not stories, but me. How many times when I'm on an airplane, or how many times have I shared with my neighbor or my relatives? I have to go first. I have to go in. I have to go deep. I have to go first. I have to be about the message of Jesus Christ. And I hope that we will, because it's our turn, it's our generation. And about 2% of churches are growing by conversion. So let's make this our commitment. In fact, while you've been watching this, just for the last almost 9 minutes, about 900 people in the world have died, and mostly will spend eternity in hell. So I hope that you can be motivated. I hope that you can somehow be inspired to do what Jesus did, to risk, to sacrifice, to give everything you have to reach the people in your communities. Because if you don't, who will?